Hello and welcome back to the Hair to Tech podcast. I'm Jen Stone here with
Amber Pearson.
So excited to have you guys joining us again. As for people who are new, the concept is Amber has been in hair for a lot of years and is interested in going into something in technology and has no idea what. So we're using this podcast as a mentoring session to understand more about what is out there in the technology world and what might be of interest to Amber. I personally am a principal security analyst for a company here in Utah and love it. So a lot of the people we're going to talk to are security people because I clearly have a bias. But Amber was saying that she was interested in development. So today, guess who we have on the call?
Who?
Ayla Khan. She is a software engineer for Recursion. Ayla, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jen. I'm glad to be here.
Will you please tell us all about you and your background and what you do?
Absolutely. So I'm a software engineer on Recursion's data engineering team. I spend a lot of time working with cloud infrastructure and building data services so that Recursion can discover new drugs or repurpose drugs for rare diseases and other medical conditions that conventional pharma companies have not been treating.
Interesting.
That sounds so fascinating.
Yeah.
It's an awesome company. Before that, I was at ARUP Labs working for their biocomputing group where they do genomics testing and research. And then before that, I was at the University of Utah doing application development.
Interesting. So usually I talk way too much, and I wanted... I kind of gave Amber homework last time. I was like, hey, can you come up with the questions? So I would love to hear what you want to know from Ayla.
Yeah. So I guess just like at a very basic level, how did you get into software development? Is that right? Software? Is that the same as software engineering?
That's such a good question.
Like, I'm green. You have to explain all of this to me.
Well, I think it depends who you ask. The entire process of software development is to produce a usable software product. It could be an application for a phone or your computer. You know, we run programs like Word and Excel, or like services that just run in the cloud and that you hit in your web browser or that another service can call. Personally, I think of software development as developing that, just the code part and putting that out there. But then I think of software engineering as the entire process from design to deploying that piece of software and managing it. So that's my personal opinion. It doesn't necessarily reflect what other people at my work think or other people in the field, but that's the way I think about it.
Gotcha. Cool. So what would you say through your various jobs? Like, do you have a standard set of things that you do daily, or what does an average day for you look like?
Oh, and I didn't answer your question about how I got started.
Oh,
either.
yes. I'm sorry. I'm interrupting myself. Sorry.
So I'll start with how I got started, which is I earned a bachelor's degree in computer science. And while I was working at the University of Utah, I earned a master's degree in computational science. That was not really necessary for my career. I just thought it would be fun and interesting, and it was. And being at the University of Utah, here's a nice perk. You get half off tuition for yourself or a member of your family.
That is a nice perk, yeah.
Yep. Now, as far as my day-to-day goes, it does tend to vary. It did vary from job to job. When I was at the university, I worked alone a lot, mostly just writing code, occasionally pitching in to write little brief snippets in papers or grants when necessary, just to explain what the software was doing, not about the research part or anything like that. When I transitioned to ARUP, it was more of a data engineering role in a team. So I switched from developing on servers or clusters to working primarily in AWS Cloud, Amazon Web Services, with the teams. So it was a much more collaborative environment. I ended up having to do a lot more documentation writing and writing a lot more tests because it is a medical service, so we had to be able to prove that the software that was supporting the genomics tests were doing what it said it was doing, and then creating dashboards for scientists and managers to look at. And then at Recursion, it's also a highly collaborative environment. So day to day, I tend to work with my teammates quite a bit. Also, I work in Google Cloud instead of Amazon, which meant that up until fairly recently, I was learning the differences between AWS and Google Cloud, and still writing a lot of code. Lately, I'm working in more of a DevOps project, so I've had to learn some of the operations side of things, deploying software, running cluster management tools, like you'll hear about Kubernetes if you start diving into the DevOps world. So that's the cluster management we use.
Brace yourself. At this point, she's going, what are all these words? So just to back up a little bit, and because a lot of the people who tune in are also very new, and that's why kind of they're interested in it. Okay, so DevOps is where you take what's developed and put it into an operational setting. So you can develop code, but it's not done until it's actually usable on production systems, right? Okay. And so that's kind of a high-level view of what DevOps does. Kubernetes is it's a way to, oh man, there's a lot to go into there. Let's just say it's a way to make sure that the code lives somewhere in the cloud. Okay. In a defined group of things, right? So you don't need to know that word. It's okay.
Okay.
So it's just another place to put the software.
Okay.
So, all right. Sorry, I did not mean to interrupt you, but I could just feel Amber going, "What are these words you are saying?" These words?
That's a really nice explanation of what Kubernetes does.
Oh, thank you.
And some of the things we are concerned about, like empowering developers to take the code they're writing, package it up, and deploy it in the cloud in a reproducible way using basically code as infrastructure. So you write out all the directives you want to say, I want my cluster of computers to look like this, and I want to deploy my service or my application in this way and expose it to other services or to a browser so it looks like this.
Right.
That's basically what that all means.
So just from I'm curious, how do you feel about Google Cloud as opposed to AWS from a developer standpoint? Do you have a preference on that, or?
I don't have a super strong preference. I feel like Google Cloud is more developer friendly. Like you can tell that they develop the services with software engineers in mind, whereas AWS feels very operations heavy.
Right.
But
I've heard that from others as well.
Extremely powerful. Yeah. Very, very powerful. Lots of services. And, it's got that name brand recognition. So if you're proposing a new project to your manager, you might be biased towards Amazon just because it's Amazon.
Sure. People have heard of AWS, and then you say GCP, and they go, not so much. But the developers that I've talked to, they love that service-based approach that GCP has. So anyway, that's neither here nor there, but I was just curious. Sorry.
No, I a couple of weeks ago was watching like a very introduction class on YouTube, like Introduction to Cybersecurity, and something that the guy being interviewed mentioned was like, get familiar with AWS, create a Google Cloud account, and what was the other one? Microsoft Azure.
Yeah,
right.
Yes. That's the big three.
So
good job.
I know what they are. I at least have done some homework. But I was like, oh my God, Google and Amazon have yet another thing that like they're dominating the field in. Like, how do they have so many things in their back pocket?
Success breeds success.
Yeah, it's incredible. But so I at least am this bit familiar with AWS and Google Cloud. I at least know what they are.
So she was telling me that she actually started taking some development classes. What were they again?
It was the one that I started taking it was just on Udemy, their web developer bootcamp. So very, very basic. And I honestly have not made it very far into it because when I was like, wow, I like this enough, I think I'm going to apply for a scholarship now. So I spent a lot of my time applying for a boot camp scholarship and then was like, oh, okay, I have to go back into the salon now.
Oh,
so
real life got to you.
Yeah.
But from your perspective, what do you have a standard set of languages that you program in, or and how did you choose that direction?
So a lot of it was chosen for me, depending on the project and the organization I was working for. So at the university, it was a lot of C++, sometimes Java, sometimes C, and later on Python. So I was working in a lot of scientific computing projects and a lot of computationally heavy software that does a lot of number crunching for physics and chemistry, is written in C and C++.
Okay.
So that dictated my toolkit. When I moved to ARUP, a lot of the data services we were writing were written in Python, and I'm sorry if you can hear my cat right now.
I love it. That's awesome.
That's all right. You can probably hear our chickens. I don't know if the dog has barked or something. It's how we work now.
Yep. So primarily Python at ARUP, and then at Recursion, it's been a mix of Python and a functional language called Clojure that you deploy on, sorry, I'm going to use another technical term, the JVM, the Java Virtual Machine.
Okay.
So it can live side by side with Java and use Java methods, but it's a purely functional language. It's really cool, by the way.
Cool.
And a little bit of Golang.
What's that? Golang?
It's a programming language developed by Google intended for low-level system work. In fact, a lot of DevOps tools that you'll hear about, like Kubernetes, or if you've heard about Docker containers, those are written in Go.
Okay.
So the other thing that we were talking about was a lot of times she wanted to talk to women in the industry because you might have a unique perspective on how is it to be female in software engineering.
It varies. I feel like my experiences have been really good so far. Maybe it's because of the organizations I've been able to get jobs at. For the most part, my colleagues have been, very supportive and professional. But yeah, I understand that it can be very isolating sometimes being the only woman on your team. I've definitely had the experience where I was the only woman in the room.
Right.
And, most of the time that feels okay, but sometimes it's a little disconcerting.
It can be harder to speak up.
Sometimes, yes.
And kind of depending on the room and so one of the things that I will tell people who ask me, if they're unhappy with their job and they're women and they're feeling like, I'm the only woman there, I tell them, look, sometimes it's because you're at the wrong company. And it's okay to change and find a good company. So I love stories about, hey, you've had good experiences because you've been with good people, right? So there's no reason to stick it out with a place that makes you feel bad about yourself.
Definitely not. I will say that Recursion has made a concerted effort to hire female engineers. Having a diverse workforce with many perspectives has been a priority.
That's excellent.
And I've been actively involved in interviewing engineers and machine learning scientists since I started there.
Wonderful.
That's awesome.
Did you have anything else?
I do have a few more questions.
Yeah.
If you
Please.
have enough time, right on.
Yes.
So, actually, let me get to my list.
You were all organized and wrote them down. I'm so impressed right now.
Oh, yes. Okay. who do you usually report to, and how often are you reporting to that person or team?
So I report to the director of data engineering since I was initially assigned to the data engineering team, even though we've broken out into shorter term teams at the moment just to do some special project work. He's still the person I directly report to. We actually have daily team stand-ups, and then typically a one-on-one every week.
Okay, cool.
So there's like a tight feedback loop between me and my manager.
That is super helpful when you can actually communicate with the person who's your team lead or your manager. It helps the work a lot.
Cool.
What else?
Yeah.
Yes. So within your role, how much autonomy would you say you have?
I'm not sure how to quantify that exactly. I would say I have about as much autonomy as any software engineer in a well-run organization has. I have time to do self-education and research new tools that I could propose that the group adopts or new techniques. But because it's a startup, we do have to align on the business goals and the research goals.
Sure.
So, just keeping that in mind is important too. We do have certain projects that are of high value to the company and do take priority.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see. 2 more questions, if that's okay.
Heck yeah.
So how many hours a day would you say you are actually working on things? Is it like you come in and immediately are cruising away on things? Is there some flexibility in what your workflow looks like, etc.?
There is, especially now that everybody's working from home. It does kind of change the dynamic a bit. I think most software engineers probably have solid coding time of 2 to 5 hours a day, depending on the project. We don't just spend the full 8-hour workday coding because you do have to read messages and answer questions and have meetings. So
Meetings are the worst.
yeah. So typical 8 to 10-hour workday, depending on what we're working on. And I think it's a good day if I can get a solid 3 to 4 hours of coding.
Okay. Cool.
Sometimes at night if I have to get caught up on stuff. That's just the nature of the game.
Gotcha. This isn't in, I have one more question, but this is not that one. Is that usually dependent on like you have you're working towards accomplishing this task, and so you have to create and follow out these subtasks within that, so it takes however long it takes until that is done by said due date?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that would be one thing. And sometimes also, we introduce bugs. Sometimes there are setbacks, unexpected complications. Maybe a tool that we decided to work on didn't quite work out as expected, so we have to backpedal a bit. We do try to, when we're doing project time estimates, we do try to factor that in, but sometimes we don't always capture that well.
Sure. Okay, last one. Are you able to do this remotely?
Yes.
Cool.
Yep. I've been working completely remotely since early March.
Okay.
My company was fairly early about deciding that everyone should work from home. They've started the labs back up, of course, but the rest of us are working off-site until further notice.
Does that seem like something like if you were like, hey, I want to go on this trip, does your company or the companies that you've been with in the past, does that seem like a pretty easy conversation to have? Or are they like, no, you need to be in the office, or if you're not, you need to take vacation time? Or are they more flexible about that?
The university was pretty flexible because academia. ARUP was more formal. You did have to, if you wanted to take a trip, you do have to request vacation time.
Okay.
I'd say Recursion probably falls a little bit more towards formal, just because they want to know that you're going to be available for, meetings and to talk to your colleagues. But they have been supportive of people going to other places to work, as long as you have, good infrastructure, a good internet connection. Just because, given the unusual circumstances we're in right now, some people have family they need to be with or to take care of.
Sure.
But I think most of the time, although my group has had typically one remote work day a week, just to give us some deep working time, they preferred it when we were working in the office together.
Okay.
I wonder how much that will be maintained once everybody starts, going back to work. I know that development is a job that can be done anywhere, but like you said, depends on the company. What's the company culture, and how do they feel comfortable managing the work? And I think the remote work that people do it's less dictated by the ability to do it remotely than by management's understanding of how to quantify the work done remotely. So, Ayla, this has been so great. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Did you have anything
I'm
else you
glad
wanted to share with her that we didn't touch on about your job, or?
Just I would second the learn at least one cloud service, because I don't think any developer or anyone entering the fields can afford not to know about it, at least at a basic level.
Okay.
And always keep learning. If you want to enter the field and be successful, you're always learning.
Love that.
Excellent advice. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Yeah.
What did you think?
That was awesome. And she's awesome.
Oh,
Seriously.
yeah.
And so I just do this thing and I'm a total badass.
Yeah.
No big deal.
Very, very casual about how great she is at what she does. Ayla is fantastic, and she has talked to me in the past about women in technology and how do we promote more diversity in the field. So it was super great to have her on the call today.
That's awesome. I love that. And I'm excited to talk to more women to get a better understanding of what their experiences have been like, because I'm sure within talking to everybody's experiences have been so different.
Yes. Yeah.
And from company to company also. That's something that I have to remember is the company's culture is so critical.
And this is something that I talk to a lot of women, and if you are out there hearing this and you hate your job, don't stay there. There are so many companies out there. There's so many places that will hire you, whether you think they will or not, they will. And you just have to go, I'm not happy. I will never be happy here. If you're like, oh, it's just this one guy holding me back or this one lady or whatever. Because I've had both men and women who have been negative enough that it made the entire experience difficult, and it really stifled my growth in trying to move forward. And looking back, man, if I had cut ties and found another place earlier, it really would have been better for all of us.
Yeah, that's so good to know, especially because this is an entirely new world, and having to keep that in mind of hey, if this company fit is not good, there are others out there. Yeah. There's other ways to do things.
Don't get me wrong. It is important to be loyal and supportive of any organization that you're part of, and you want to help move it forward. But if it's a lost cause, it's a lost cause, and recognizing that early is helpful.
Yeah.
So, all right. Cool. So you think you might want to be a developer?
I'm still leaning towards security. The more I learn about security, I'm like, an ethical hacker, sign me up. That sounds rad. So I think I'm still leaning towards that.
Here's the trick, though. Really good hackers have a development background, so keep working away at it.
Yeah, that's right, because that only helps you understand the things.
How it all works and how you can get in.
Yeah.
Well, thanks again for joining us. I'm Jen Stone.
And I'm Amber Pearson.
Hope to see you again next week.